CCM launched the Municipal Voice at the end of 2018 and celebrated the first anniversary in 2019. Over the 26 episodes this year, we had over 60,000 listeners with guests that brought the unique municipal perspective to the forefront. In this episode, we are going to take a look back at some of those guests and what they had to say about municipal issues, transportation, state politics, and sustainability. As we begin a new year, I'd like to thank everyone that made 2019 a success. From the leadership at CCM, Paul Bass and Harry Droz at WNHH, to all of our guests, and of course you, the listener. Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders.
Is the special education side.
Yeah, that's a big question right there.
So in Waterbury, about 22% of our 19,000 children have been identified with some sort of special needs.
Yeah.
It's wide ranging, but it also can be extraordinarily expensive. And so, we're always trying to tackle those issues, working with our legislative
And
delegation.
I know that it's an issue, obviously, for Waterbury, but in smaller towns, it can be an even bigger issue because a single student moving from one town to the other who's a special education student can drastically change the budget for a smaller town.
A smaller town that has one or two out-of-district placements could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Whereas Waterbury, New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford, we have schools that some of them have been equipped to handle such children. And so we're actually, Senator, taking 4 special children from the town of Watertown.
Right.
Makes it easier and cheaper for them to send them one town over into Waterbury, into our school, than to send them to other further away places. So it's a work in progress, but the good news is it's being discussed and it's
work being done. And,
yes,
there's stuff happening.
Right. On that point, right now, I believe it's a town has to spend 4.5 times its per pupil expenditure out of its own budget on a special education case before the state comes in and pays the excess cost. There's a lot of interest this year. In fact, I'm putting in a bill myself that would reduce that, so the town would only have to spend 2 or 2.5 times its per pupil expenditure before the state would come in with covering the excess cost. And as said, that's a problem for every community, but especially for the smaller towns. And in addition to the problem of being unable to budget for that, you never know when a new case is going to erupt. And somebody moves into town at the start of the school year that wasn't there the last school year.
Yeah.
But yet it's that town's responsibility to provide for that child.
And suddenly they have to refigure out budgeting.
Yes,
and
that's right.
They can get complicated fast.
Beyond the brownfields thing, you mentioned earlier that you were the hardware city. Now you're the what do you call it?
The new hardware city.
But a lot of that new hardware, making it requires a more educated workforce. Do you see education as a component for these new industries coming in?
Absolutely. It has to be a skilled workforce. I know that in the Hartford region, we do have a very highly skilled workforce, but in our urban areas, there's always more that we can do to give our young people the opportunity to get into these areas.
The trade schools and stuff.
Absolutely.
Like that.
New Britain's home to E.C. Goodwin Technical High School, which is very unique to have that tech high school here in the city. But they are pumping out graduates that are well trained in manufacturing and for these industries.
Relevant now.
We also just started the Manufacturing Technology Academy at New Britain High School, which partners with a lot of our local manufacturers, and we are teaching to their needs.
So it's not just, here's a general technique. There's companies in New Britain right now that are looking for people that can do.
We are creating our own pipeline for employment to be able to employ our own.
Keep people living in town.
Yes, we need that, right? We want to keep those young people. Yes, we want to keep younger people living in town, working here, buying homes here, supporting our local economy. So we're creating our own programs. One unique story that I always like to tell is about a local manufacturer that we have. It's called Peter Paul Electronics, and Peter Paul, they not only do they have a plant here, but they have a plant in Puerto Rico as well. And Peter Paul created their own academy. So they have Peter Paul Academy. And they will hire people with no training at all and put them through their own academy where they teach them the skills that they need in order to be.
That's a great program.
It's incredible that they have the resources to be able to do that. Now, not every manufacturer has the ability to do that, but this happened years ago, and they worked really closely at the time with our federal delegation in order to get dollars to make that happen. And it's been an incredible resource for them.
So it's years ago. So it's a fully developed program now, like people who have gone through it and are already working.
Oh yeah, and they've been with the company for many years. So it's a great way to retain your talent as well too.
Yeah, at that point.
Yes, I do. And the problem with Hamden, when you look at our budget, is that the vast majority of our taxes do come from residential. We don't
from property tax.
Yeah, from property tax.
As in pretty much in all towns in Connecticut, really.
Yes, absolutely. And if we could chat about that a bit, because I think
I would love to talk about that. Maybe the way the state
progressive tax system that there is, but Hamden's tax base itself does not have a lot of areas zoned for business. Mm-hmm. So our business tax base, the portion of our taxes from commercial is smaller, and it's not due to vacancy, because our vacancy rate is very, very low in the region. But we just don't have a lot of land that's zoned for commercial. So there's a few actually pretty exciting projects that are happening. A couple that are on the forefront, but they're not going to be game changers that are going to shift
revenue generators.
A quarter of the taxes over to commercial. So that's one of the challenges that we face.
Talking about the state and the challenges there, and also the tax base, I know New Haven has Yale. You have Quinnipiac, which is tax exempt too, right?
Yes.
And then there's the pilot program. Do you think there needs to be changes to that formula for cities especially and towns like yours that have a large proportion of land to non-taxable?
Without question. We got into a point where, like I said before, you can only tax so much, and what we need to do on a local level is get the power to diversify the tax base. The municipal, the only municipal tax that's allowed is a property tax,
property
right?
Tax, yeah.
So, person living here in a $200,000 house that has a terrific job and a great savings account. And this person here has got no job with the exact same value house, or tax the same amount.
They're going to tax the same amount. Yeah.
It's just an unfair system in my opinion.
Yeah,
right?
in many people's opinions.
So to be able to diversify that and have perhaps a homestead exemption, to be able to have some different fees assessed. This year we talked about, and we actually our delegation and Senator Looney, who covers Hamden and New Haven. Brought a bill forward that would allow us to charge a municipal fee to nonprofits, nonprofit universities that for police and fire services. And
because they pick up the phone and call the police. It's your police that are responding. Yeah.
Sure. Quinnipiac is a wonderful institution, and it's a real value to have in the town. Yeah. But it also taxes us financially. So we need to evolve, and as things are adjusting, that diversification of revenues, I think, will include the larger institutions. It should include the larger institutions too. New Haven even more so, because half of their land is nonprofit.
Yeah. So one issue that pops up are the implications of zoning, whether it's demolishing historic buildings, putting up market rate buildings, as we talked about, rewriting zoning rules to benefit walkable cities, and creating new commercial zoning districts. What makes zoning something that makes a city tick? Is it something that every New Haven resident should be paying attention to? Taisha?
Absolutely. I think zoning is really important, because if you don't pay attention to zoning and how the laws are changing, you could live in a neighborhood that looks totally different than when you first got there. So I think people need to really pay attention so their voice could be heard and how some of these changes are being made.
What are some of the changes that stick out to you?
So you mentioned like making the city more walkable, right? Also, we know a lot of people have cars, so parking is also included in some zoning. So finding a balance, and I just think that everyone should be engaged in their future. If this is a city that they planted their feet in, and this is going to be home. I think people should continuously be engaged in things that will affect their everyday life, right? Sometime you live on a block where it's all residential, and then you wake up the next day and you got these big, tall buildings being built right across the street. So if you're not paying attention to how zoning regulations are changing, then you'll be surprised. So I just think people need to really pay attention, so that more often than not, we're not changing things and then people coming after the fact saying, well, I don't agree. Get more collective voices in the beginning makes a lot of sense to me.
How should people in town get involved in that? Follow the news, show up in meetings? What's the best way to stay plugged in? What's going on?
I think it's a lot of different ways. I think you have to do
There's no
all
one
of the
right
above.
way.
It's not one right way.
Yeah.
I think people should pay attention to the news. I think people should pay attention to their orders, letters, emails. I think people should read the newspaper. However, we have to do it. Everybody knows social media right now is taking basically over, right? So people should pay attention to social media, all of those things, so that they don't miss it.
Do you both utilize social media in your jobs as alders? Is that something that's an important kind of communication with your constituency?
I have utilized social media, but not so much for me because a lot of my constituents aren't on my social media.
Well, that's under consideration.
But I definitely send out emails. I do newsletters. I attend every community meeting. So it's other ways to get the word out there.
So a lot of different ways, and that's just one tool in the toolkit.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to add in concerning the zoning is that the Board of Alders, how things are structured now, everything that goes before city plan comes before the Board of Alders.
Okay.
And so we have that knitted relationship so that we know what's going on.
You're really in it, hands-on, and everything comes across.
It's the alders that have their ears to the ground.
Yeah.
And so we just had a meeting recently, and with the development that's coming up, it's important that we consider the fact that this still remains Elm City.
Yeah.
So green space is important.
Yeah.
The new urban design is bringing buildings to the front.
Yeah.
And I think that's good in some places, but it doesn't work everywhere.
Yeah.
And so this is something that the alders are actively involved with, because we're listening
preserving
to our
green space and some of the other things like what they call bioswales and those sort of.
We have the bioswales that are beautifying the city. It's
dealing with the extra rainwater and I think it's a reaction to some of the MS4 stuff, if I'm not mistaken, but I can look that up later. You also mentioned it being a walkable city, specifically in relation to attracting millennials.
So look, this is Connecticut.
Yeah.
Okay, you can only walk a few months out of the year here.
Yeah.
Right. We get snow. We get cold rain.
Yeah.
And so, how far are you going to walk? You can't walk to work. If it's raining, you're going to get drenched. And so, we have to work on a structure that's going to improve our bus system if we're going to be a true walkable city.
Yeah.
At some point, you got to get on the bus, or at some point, you've got to jump in your car.
Yeah.
Cars are going to
walking
remain
in a couple of blocks of downtown, your job doable. But if you're all the way out,
you live in Westville,
Amity,
you can't walk downtown.
Yeah.
Right.
So a better bus system is a part of that equation.
Absolutely.
And the state has created a new tier for the state retirement system, a tier 3. Do you think, Selectman, that we can amend the municipal employee retirement system to establish a tier consistent with the state?
So we're not in MERS, Matt. That's the municipal employee retirement system.
Okay.
We fully fund our pensions. We make 100% of the ARC, which is an acronym for annual required contribution. This is on the town side. Our Board of Ed, the teachers have a contribution to their pension plan at the state level. So I'm not one who is an expert on MERS because we do it the other way. And many years I've overfunded the pension. And what I've done also is, and the rating agencies like this, I personally went through the investment portfolio that we had on the pension plans and readjusted them with the assistance of some professional financial people. And keep this in mind, most municipalities have to return a 7.5% return on these pensions. And if you're below that, your ARC, your annual requirement contribution, goes up every year. It's an impact to the taxpayers. The goal is and should be to exceed the 7.5% potential ratio that you're trying to yield. Now we're up at 11% right now.
So you're doing good.
We're doing very well, and a lot of it's lost in the shuffle, so to speak. I think chief elected officials really need to look at the investment strategy, and we've been fortunate that we're exceeding the projected yield.
Yeah, you're fortunate, George. So obviously, it's not an issue in North Haven, but for other towns that are in MERS, how would this affect them?
So it's an interesting time with MERS. There's a couple of issues that are related. So first is, again, the tiers haven't changed. It's been in place for decades. And so we'd like to see some flexibility. And this would impact, it's important to know, this would impact new hires. So people existing in the system would not be impacted.
They're grandfathered in there.
Correct. Okay. So this would be for new hires, that they would be required to contribute a little bit more, and the plan would change slightly for those new individuals. There's another piece of this that relates to the cost, and that's a recent decision by the MERS, the retirement board at the state, to lower the assumed rate of return on their assets. So essentially what that does, and Selectman Frieda kind of mentioned it, is the lower the rate of return that you assume, the more you're going to have to contribute to make up the full amount. Right. Yeah. So they announced that they wanted to reduce, I think it's from 8 to 7 or 8 to 6.9%. They wanted to reduce the rate of return, which means that towns are going to now have to contribute more to make their annual ARC. So that's one side of it. And then obviously a new tier would help, because the employee would help contribute to those changes as well. So there are some issues with MERS funding right now. And if nothing is done, no new tiers are created, towns are going to be paying more just because the rate of return is assumed to be less now. So
and how many towns are part of MERS?
I believe the number is 81 or 82.
Okay, so about half the state.
About half the towns are in the system,
and the other half is doing it themselves, as North Haven does.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Towns are waiting for the bond commission to fund the town aid road grants and the local capital improvement program, or LOCIP. LOCIP.
Yep. Very familiar with it.
Those are two important grants for infrastructure. As a selectman, how important is it that the governor get towns and cities these dollars?
Well, we should have already done this. This is just beyond reprehensible. LOCIP we don't expect until February. So that's not a problem right now. LOCIP dollars are apportioned out to municipalities. They have to request them and put in for certain expenditures. That's not the problem. Town Aid Road was supposed to be in the municipalities in July. Some municipalities use that money to, depending on what they get, small towns don't get enough to do any real road work. They use it to help offset the cost of sand and salt and other winter supplies. The larger cities get enough money to actually fix a road. Roads cost the same whether you're in a small municipality or a large municipality. So,
and I imagine for the towns that are trying to fix their roads, if they got it in July, they could have gotten going on that during the warm months. And
well, they could have been.
At this point now, they're not going to start working on it necessarily over the winter.
You can't work on a road over the winter. The asphalt plant's closed down.
So like this kind of season, they missed their opportunity to get that done.
The asphalt plant's closed down. They closed down by December 1st. We have missed a whole construction cycle. Absolutely missed a whole construction cycle. And it's much more than about the potholes in the road. It's jobs. It's truly jobs. It's construction jobs. And, that's not something that we should see happen. I'm also equally as concerned that once we get a bond package, that it won't get put on a bond agenda. And that's $120 million that is given out to municipalities. We need to have some assurances that's going to happen, and that's going to happen soon.
So when we introduced our CT Fast Track service, one of the things we recognized was that that fare system had to be modernized. And so we've been introducing new improvements over the last couple of years. Last year we introduced this Go CT card. It's an account-based card, so you can go online and renew it, load funds. If you don't have a credit card, you can walk into a store, hand the clerk your card, and give them cash. Give them cash, and they'll load the card for you.
That's a lot of great stuff. So you've mentioned a couple times the Fast Track. It's going between New Britain and Hartford, Buckland Hill Stores Express to Yukon. To the mall. What role do you mention for the younger generation? What do they play in the changing public perception of buses and public transit in general?
I think what you're seeing is that communities around the country that are thriving have a very strong public transportation system, one that's working, and that's why it's relevant. It's relevant first because it gets people to their jobs, into medical appointments, into education. But it's also important because it's really a way to attract people, right? People want to live near transit. Makes getting around easier.
Transit-oriented development's a big
buzzword. It is, isn't it? Yeah. And what we're seeing in New Britain, for example, is and between New Britain and Hartford is over $200 million in private sector investment happening. I think the most
based around the Fast Track.
It really is, yeah. The most exciting example I find is in downtown New Britain. If you walk over to the CT Fast Track station, you'll see 4-story buildings rising up from a formerly vacant site. A whole new mixed-use development.
So retail on the first floor for fast track riders, get something to eat before they get on, and above it,
living space.
Living space. Okay. So someone that wants to commute on the bus can live right there. And
it's pretty exciting, and it's great. As a matter of fact, I've only been in Connecticut 4 years, and just walking around New Britain over the last 4 years, I've seen this like new energy.
You're seeing the changes.
New energy, really. And Mayor Stewart has been a champion of CT Fast Track. It's pretty exciting. Every time Mayor Stewart goes out and does a public event, you'll hear her talk about how CT Fast Track has played a role in the rebirth of New Britain.
And is that?
But we knew that on the cusp, and this is 2013 when I got elected, so we knew we were on the cusp of something truly special with CT Fast Track. And the main hub was going to be in our downtown. It was going to be opening up in less than 2 years. And the city had no planning. There was not a single document that had planned for any of this. And so when you had this mass transportation hub that is all of a sudden going to be plunked right in the middle of your downtown, you have no plan for development. First things first is exactly what we did. So we created this transit-oriented development master plan that dovetailed nicely with our Complete Streets master plan, which just ended up in this explosion of downtown development, which is what we're seeing now.
The Complete Streets, you mentioned that. What's that program about?
So the Complete Streets master plan started right before I became mayor. Our public works department took that on, and it started off as one phase, which is now turned into 9 phases. And our Complete Streets master plan, it's all about road dieting, making everything more pedestrian friendly, accommodating to cyclists, user friendly.
So just the kind of latest thinking on urban planning for town.
You got it. Drives some people nuts because a lot of people don't understand why we have all of the bike lanes. What are these bike lanes for? Do people even use these? Yes, they do. And when we do our regional bike share program, people are going to use them a lot more. What is this head in or angle out parking that you're doing? Well, it's safer for pedestrians and children. But all of these things put together, which has turned into this 9-phase Complete Streets master plan, has allowed us access to so much available federal funding as well. And our bus livability grants, federal transit authority grants that we've received have just been flowing in because you'll see the transformation if you visit us here.
Speaking of cooperation with other levels of government, one thing we're interested in is the effective partnership with your state legislative delegation, split between Democrats and Republicans. How do you, as New Britain, work as a team to accomplish the many goals you have from the state level down?
I bypass them.
Okay.
I hate to say it. But, there's definitely some legislators that I have that I work much better with than others. Representative Bobby Sanchez is a Democrat. We work very well together on education issues. Senator Gennaro Bizzarro, he's new. This was his first session. So he was getting his feet wet this year, but we worked together and on many different things. Representative Pettit, he has a little tiny sliver of New Britain, but he is always there when I need him to be an advocate. So one of the most important things, though, I think, is just communication. Even if we're not working together per se, always keeping everyone in the loop. And that's always what I try to do is, just send an email or a memo every once in a while, hey, New Britain legislative team, I'm working on X, Y, and Z, just want to give you a heads up. Or I'll be meeting with this commissioner, or I'll be in the governor's office about this. Just wanted to give you a heads up.
Transparency.
You got it. And you know what? When everyone is in the know, that makes for much more effective leadership because they can't say, oh, geez, I didn't know about that. So every year, I try to provide my legislative delegation, and I do, with a legislative memo. Here's my top 5 or top 10 issues that are of importance.
What we're focusing on this year.
Yep. Here's what our focus is this year. Our lobbyists will be advocating for boom, boom, and boom. If you want to talk to me about anything more, here's my little blurb on each one of these. Would love your advocacy on that. Let me know if you want to champion anything.
That sounds great.
It's effective. It works because they can either, they can read it and throw it away, or they can read it and do something with it. It's up to them. But I'm going to keep pushing forth with my agenda with or without them.
For this session, definitely the transportation plan. I know that's out there. We're excited about it in the sense if it does make the investments in Tweed that we've been asking for, we think the proximity of having the airport this close to downtown New Haven and the types of businesses that we have here, and that you could get on a plane in just a few minutes from downtown New Haven makes a big difference. Makes a big difference for the university, for the hospital system, but so many of our small tech businesses. Really, it can be a manufacturing business. In this economy where people communicate through technology a lot more, when you really do have to be somewhere and be somewhere in person, you need to be able to get there. And you need to be able to get in, but also be able to get out. It makes it a lot more desirable. Here, a great example I heard from one of our manufacturers. They have customers around the world. They want their customers to come visit their plant, talk with them, understand their process, see the product. If it's difficult to get into New Haven, then the customer's rep just may decide, this month when I'm doing my travels, I'm not going to go to New Haven. It's just going to be too much of a hassle.
If they have to fly into New York or Hartford and then take a long drive to get here,
that starts happening over a lot of time. Then then maybe you lose that relationship, and eventually you lose that customer. That's a trickle down, but that's the type of impacts, positive and negative, if we have an investment in that airport as southern tier airport for the state here at Tweed. That would make a big difference. And frankly, too, Tweed is in the best position of the airports in the state to be able to take that investment, pave runway, have a long runway that supports
and it seems like an obvious
more
choice.
Flights. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's not to say there's not challenges, and we need to work with neighborhoods and communities, but how do we have access there without disturbing local population? But you asked about issues for the legislative session. I mean, it's clear to me that the transportation package will be part of that, and making sure that Tweed is really recognized within that transportation package is key for us.
In one of our last episodes, Garrett Sheehan is the president of the New Haven Chamber of Commerce. He said that Tweed was the key to unlocking the economic development potential for the greater New Haven area and the state as a whole. You've asked the Attorney General to either appeal the Second Circuit ruling or recuse himself from that decision. Can you tell us why you disagree with the Chamber of Commerce on Tweed?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. First of all, the Attorney General conflict no longer exists because
that's settled. Okay.
With the loss of Mayor Harp, he was just too close to Mayor Harp because he supported her.
Okay, so that was the crux of that. Gotcha.
Yes, she had given him his nomination speech. He had went out and supported her, so obviously there was this political allegiance that I think was too close for him to make an objective finding.
So the new administration kind of takes care of that
problem. I believe so. Yeah. I believe so. The thing about Tweed is this, what people may or may not know is way back when Mayor DeStefano was mayor, Tweed had a problem. And the problem was that the FAA told them that unless they got the emergency runway extension, they would have to shut down certain flights and limit all sorts of stuff. So Marty Looney and I talked about it. Mayor Capone is mayor of East Haven at the time. Michael Lawler, who was rep, we all got together and said, we don't want this to happen to Tweed. East Haven was against the extension of the runway, even for emergency purposes. So we coddled a contract that East Haven would drop all their lawsuits, that they would extend the emergency runway. It would remain unpaved. And we codified that in statute. And New Haven was more than happy with that. Everybody signed this agreement. And life went on and they were saved. Then what New Haven did was go behind our backs, and Senator Looney and myself in particular, and tried to negate this deal in a court. And Marty and I took the position that this is grossly unjust. You don't make a deal in good faith
and then turn around
and try to kill the deal. And it lacks the good faith that you need. If you're going to expand that airport, there's got to be a lot of trust. How can you trust the city of New Haven when they make a deal, people go out of their way to help them, being Senator Looney and myself, and the mayors, particularly Mayor Capone at the time, go out of their way to help them to make this happen, take political heat for doing that, and they promise they're not going to pave it. This is not about extension runway. And as soon as they get what they want, all the lawsuits are dropped, turn around and say, we want to go back on the deal and we're going to run the court.
Yeah.
So our objection is, look, if you want to do that, show us what you want to do. Give us a master plan. Let us look at it. Tell us what your goals are 5-10 years down the road. And still, as I sit here now, there has been no master plan given to Senator Looney and myself, no map, no goals, no direction, nothing with it. Just, we want to expand. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good enough for our constituents.
A little bit more specific, yeah.
You need to tell us what you're doing, why you're doing, how many flights, where they're coming in, what's the glide slope for takeoff, what's the glide slope for landing, where's the main terminal going to be, where's the traffic going to be, how many people are going to be in the waiting areas.
There's a whole lot of specifics.
There's a whole lot of specifics.
And
they just want us to say, go ahead and do it. And Senator Looney and I have made it clear for years. And once again, except for one meeting, to this day, not one person from Tweed or from that planning division has come to us and said, let's sit down and have a conversation where we want to go.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH LP 103.5 FM.
A kind of final one here. There's a quote that you've actually used recently, Senator Looney, from John Kenneth Galbraith. It says, "The conventional view serves to protect us from the painful job of thinking." With that in mind, what is some of the hard thinking that needs to get done in Connecticut, and is 2019 going to be the year for Connecticut to shine?
Well, I believe it can be, and I hope it will be. And what I meant by that is that we do have to be creative and think of new ways to deal with our problems. And I think our major challenge is, as we said earlier, promoting regionalism, providing more effective ways for the state to assist municipalities in ways that are more cost effective than what we've been looking at now. We have 169 municipal fiefdoms. We need to find more regional ways of promoting services, whether it be more regional school districts, more regional boards of any kind, more regional public safety districts. All of those things have to move forward in order for us to really advance as a state. The challenge, of course, has been that goes against our traditions of Connecticut being
our very long traditions.
Yes, our long traditions of very close local control and the sense of each of those 169 towns being very jealously protective of their prerogatives. But in reality, in 2019, that really stands in the way of the state's economic development and its ability to fund services in an effective way.
You mentioned the rainy day fund. It's predicted to have more money than it's ever had. How would that factor into your thinking about spending and cutting?
I will say I think it's wise to have a cushion. You could argue that the cushion is too big. Rather than deferring payments on teacher pension plan, which are going to cost you multiples of that in the future, maybe take some of that surplus and pay down that liability, because the return on that is very, very powerful, given deferring it is such an expensive thing. Maybe fund a little bit of a tax cut. A surplus means that you've collected more from taxpayers than arguably what you need for the current budget. But we don't even think about that. Heaven forbid we ever give it back to the people that gave it to us. So we need to be balanced about it, because the economy can turn very quickly. Connecticut has lagged the national economy, so having some element of surplus, I think, is smart.
One interesting thing that was brought up on our last episode was that the rainy day fund is at the highest level it's ever been, meaning that Connecticut theoretically taxed more than it needed to. What makes more sense in that instance, cutting those taxes or giving more funding to towns and cities?
Well, that just came from someone that just doesn't understand things. It's quite frankly, you need to understand government too. I know it's nice to say that you should do this and do that when you've never been in it, but our rating agencies asked us to have a higher rainy day fund. The problem, when Governor Rell left, was there was no rainy day fund. And when we went into the recession, that was an awful recession that hit Eastern Connecticut harder than any other part of the state. We were the 9th worst labor market in the whole country. It took us, we are still crawling back out of that problem, but we had to take on the extra costs of the unemployment fund. We had to take on extra costs of helping out municipalities. For years, The municipal grants, which are set on a per capita basis, generally speaking, were held harmless. So there was no fluctuation based on what it should be. And I think that, you have to have a rainy day fund. The rainy day, the rating agencies require it. Wall Street requires it. And we're only going to go up to 15%. And then anything collected after that by law will go to pay down our unfunded liabilities on both our pensions, our health care, and our debt service.
Now, there's some economists right now predicting a recession looming in the near future. Would touching the rainy day fund for transportation projects put the state in a worse position to weather the storm if that does happen, so to speak, if there's a economic downturn?
And the answer is no. But I will tell you this, under Governor Lamont's toll plan for trucks, he admits that if he goes into recession, or his people in his administration admit, they're trying to take out $250 million a year over 4 years. So if
from the rainy day fund.
For the transportation plan. So if there is a recession, they're not going to be able to do the transportation plan. So so a recession will stop their transportation plan. A recession on our side does not stop the transportation plan. So the only thing we have to worry about is the general fund.
Yeah.
Number one, we got $1.2 billion, still the historic amount in our rainy day fund. Number two is we could protect against a recession coming. If you looked at our rainy day fund for the past 5 or 6 years, other than 2010, and I'll explain that in a second, the most we've ever taken out of our rainy day fund has been about $200 million.
Out of a total of?
Out of our rainy day fund to help our budget.
How big is the fund in general?
I'm sorry?
How big is the total fund? Like when you take out $250 million, like how
we'd have
how much is that?
$1.2 billion.
Okay.
And we would take out, the most we've ever taken out at any time was $200 million.
Okay.
Now, we did exceed that in 2010. We took out $1.1 billion.
That's a big number. What was that for?
Well, the 2008 recession hit. And look, I say it like it is, and it is what it is. The 2008 recession hit. Republicans said, we're in a recession. We got to change our budget. The Democratic majority said, you're panicking. It hasn't touched our budget yet. Let's wait. In 2009, we said, the recession is getting all over this country. It's coming. They said, no, we're not going to change. The Democratic majority said, we're not going to change our budget. We ended up going into a deficit more than anyone even thought, even us. And because they never prepared for the deficit, they got hit with a huge budget deficit for that year and going into the next year. So they had to draw on the rainy day fund. The point being, and they did it for this reason, Governor Rell was on the out. She was a lame duck. So she wasn't saying, don't touch a rainy day fund, we got to do things. She just let it go.
Got hands off at that point.
And the Democrats didn't want to make cuts to the budget. Because that's tough decisions. So they knew they could steal the rainy day fund. So they sat back and then they said, hey, we got to touch the rainy day fund, we're broke, leading no other conclusion. And we said this was going to happen, and it did. My point being is we have $1.2 billion in a rainy day fund. If we get a recession, 2008 recession is now equivalent to the 29 crash. It's a 100 years event.
It was big.
And it was disastrous. We're probably not going to ever have a recession like that. But if we see it coming, all we have to do is change our budget to deal with it. And maybe we can't deal with all of it by budget adjustments, but we still have $1.2 billion. So we are safe. But the bottom line is, if it is true that transportation is the success of the state, our plan preserves transportation. Their plan puts transportation at risk. So I would argue that our plan is better.
Wow, there's a lot of issues there. I'd like to get one of the other side on to hear their side on that one.
I would too.
Yeah, right? It would be a good conversation. Selecting Ergo. So what is North Stonington doing in order to try to achieve a bronze first year? Can you go straight to silver in your first year if you really went above and beyond?
I think it happened, but
someone went straight to silver. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to go with bronze to start. I mean,
work your way up. Yep.
We're going to work our way up, and we're really excited about a lot of things that we have been doing, but also, are doing now. And the the walk audit was actually a thing that we did perform, and it played into. We actually just this past Saturday had a community conversation about our greater village area, which is incorporates where our library is, our town hall is, our schools actually all are in this kind of really quaint and beautiful area. So the walk audit gave us some data to kind of look at and say, okay, how are we doing here? How is everybody able to traverse the area? Biking is a really big thing through our town of North Stonington. So we've done a couple of those things. I think the walk audit was the first thing. This community conversation is probably a part 2 for an equity builder as well, which will get the data together and probably submit that here near in the future. And then some other kind of cool things that are upcoming for us. We have No Stow Fest, which is our town-wide event. We close down Main Street. It's all things North Stonington.
No Stow Fest.
Stow Fest. Big community event. It's really, really cool.
When's that happening?
It's happening September 21st from 12 to 4. So everybody's welcome to come down.
Is it free for everybody?
Free for everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah, free for everybody. Got bands. It's all things North Stonington. But one of the things that we're going to do, just kind of a cool little thing during that, we have a car show, and it's going to be an EV car show is actually going to be kind of part of it. So it's kind of a neat little thing that kind of inserts here. But certainly that's an event that's all about the community. I think we're in our 3rd year now, or 4th year for the event. And so that's happening. And then I think one of the bigger things, and it is really a big impact thing, is the solar initiatives that we have in town. So we already had solar on a few buildings. We'll have solar on all buildings,
all municipal buildings,
by the end of this year.
Okay. So that's already in the works.
It's in the works. Yeah. So we have 2 that they're going to go on, and then we have an elementary school which will be completed next year, and then solar will go on that building as well.
A new school building.
A new school, renovate as new.
Renovated. Okay.
Yep. And then the other part of it is that we are in the process right now of we want to create a community solar program whereby residents can actually buy into, they can change over and get their energy from this plant that would be in North Stonington. So that's kind of in the early discussions.
Would it be town owned?
It would not be town owned. Where it's been discussed is on town property, but it would be leased and run by completely somebody else.
Okay.
But it would be hopefully a cost savings to residents, but also just a really big eco impact to the community. So, I mean, we're really, I'm very passionate about the environment, and a lot of people, of course, in the town are and are all over the world. So we're just really excited to take some of these actions, and really, it's nice to put everything in one place with Sustainable CT to see the impact that you're actually making.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening right now and what's affecting in Connecticut and abroad?
Absolutely. And I will start with just the simple basic, what folks are doing at the curb.
Yeah.
So, folks set out their blue bin, and that material is then taken to a material recovery facility after it's been brought to a transfer station, and it's sorted and baled. And that material is sold as a commodity. Yeah. And so what you put in your blue bin is really important because it tells what the value will be at the back end as a commodity. And historically, those bales were being sent to mills here in the United States or in China. And then maybe I would say for the last 8 to 10 years, we really saw that the markets were hot.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of return on that material. And so because the material recovery facilities were reaping those benefits, the healthy profits, they were sharing that revenue with our municipalities.
Okay.
And basically, they were sharing it to win over contracts so they get that tonnage coming off the curb. The problem with the material is either they're putting the wrong thing in the curb, or the material recovery facility. We call it a MRF. I'm just going to call it a MRF now.
What was that again? A material
recovery facility.
MRF. Okay.
So it's easier to just say MRF.
You got it.
So that material was being sent to China and wasn't always clean. And when right. So what does that mean, clean? Because a lot of people think,
garbage.
Clean recyclables. Does that mean the peanut butter in my peanut butter jar? No, we're talking about items that don't belong. So items in the blue bin that shouldn't be there, they're unwanted, they're
for example, what do we get a lot of?
A rubber hose.
Okay, rubber, not recyclable?
Not recyclable. Propane tanks, not recyclable.
Yeah, I imagine that's a little bit of a surprise for some people collecting too. We get tanks and other pressure vessels, which should absolutely not be in there, correct?
And dangerous.
Yeah, they could explode, they could have flammable stuff in them.
Right. And then there's items that's inside your home that you would just normally think like, oh, it's plastic. I can put it
what's
in
a less obvious bad one?
So we call it a spiral wound container.
Spiral wound one.
So what would that be? A peanut jar that's cardboard in the middle and metal on the ends.
They're popping fresh, but they're not recycling fresh. Yeah.
That spiral bound container is non-recyclable. But folks would say, oh, it's cardboard. It's metal. I can recycle it.
Yeah.
But it's out in what we call
now,
the universal.
Is that because of the actual cardboard itself and the metal, or is it because they're combined into one item?
Because they're combined into one item.
And they would have to be separated, and that doesn't work because they're attached.
Right. And then there are items like ice cream containers. Believe it or not, you think
like the cardboard kind of regular half-gallon sort of one?
Exactly. So the fibers and the plastics that is made out of doesn't have the same value. There's no... it's not really a commodity, so it's not wanted. So we actually don't want it in. So it's in the out category, not the in category.
Huh.
So it can be complicated, but that's basically when we say the recyclables aren't clean, and we say they're contaminated, they are contaminated with items we don't want because they can't be sold to market to be made into a new product. So that resulted in the China sword.
Okay, the China sword. So this is a new policy, or not super new, but policy from China promoting themselves and basically saying, we don't want your recyclables and your junk anymore.
Right. So they've created sort of their own domestic market right now, but also it had a lot to do with brokers were sending bales of material that were contaminated with actual garbage in them. And then they were having to deal with that residual waste and paying for that processing. So now what they're saying is we're not going to take anything that has 0.5% contamination. And our average bale has 20% contamination.
Okay, that's a little bit far off the mark.
Right. So because of that, our material recovery facilities, our MRFs, a lot of them are finding themselves having to stockpile the material. Those contracts are starting to reverse for our municipalities. So we're starting to see where our towns once made money from sharing that revenue because markets were hot. Now that the markets are down, those MRFs need to recover their costs. So now they're charging the municipalities hundreds of thousands of dollars.
There's so much to talk about now. We are doing so many things.
One thing that's of interest to our membership, certainly, is recycling.
Yes.
And there's been some changes recently in China, where basically with the new China sword policy, they don't want a lot of our recycling.
Exactly.
Certainly not before, I guess they refer to it as dirty materials, that they want extra clean plastic and stuff.
Right.
And this has caused the tipping fees, the cost of getting rid of this stuff to go up.
Right.
So can you kind of give us the short version of what's going on and what you guys are doing in relation to recycling in China?
Absolutely. Well, we certainly know that recycling has become more costly for municipalities as a result of this change in the Chinese policy about importing recyclables from Connecticut or from the U.S. So we're really excited here at our department to be able to implement some legislative authority that's enabling us to support things like anaerobic digestion that can create that industry here in the state.
To support companies that are interested in developing that?
Yes,
locally?
and being able to process those organics, which tend to be wet and heavy and more expensive to transport. So it's great to be able to process those locally.
Do it locally.
And we have some great examples of that, how that's already emerged, and we're looking forward to expand that further. But we're really, I would say this is not a problem that DEEP can solve on its own. One thing that's very important as we are, as towns are addressing these commodity changes for recycling costs, is that for me as the commissioner, it just, doubles my commitment that we need to develop strong partnerships with municipalities to help us find the way forward and find the best solutions.